What we see in Leah is a picture in so many lives producing things that we hope will win us approval, trying to work for our acceptance, usually in the wrong way, in the wrong places, and usually from the wrong people, until God is enough for you. It will never be enough, no matter what it is. God has to be first. Today, of course, we're in this death to selfie. We're looking at the life of Jacob and then the people that are around Jacob. And in life, as so many times, people get so caught up in trying to control their future and even manipulate the outcome of that future. We want to be in control. We want to be the ones that are responsible for it. And we see these tendencies in Jacob. And we're also going to see them today in another character in this particular story. But we think that sometimes we can do a better job than God. And as we look at this story today, we're going to see this very thing in action. So when we pick this up in Genesis 29, Jacob has just, deceived his brother Esau out of his blessing and his birthright. He is running for his life, and he's actually heading to take refuge with his uncle Laban. Okay, so he's leaving Bethel. He's running, remember he got this blessing once again by deception and being someone he wasn't. And remember, just as we kind of reviewed there, God cannot bless who you pretend to be. So here we go. Stay with me. Genesis chapter 21. We're going to start in verse 1. Then Jacob continued on his journey and came to the land of the eastern peoples. Verse 2. There he saw a well opened in the country, where 3 flocks of sheep lying near it, because the flocks were watered from that well. And the stone over the mouth of that well was large. That's important. When all the flocks were gathered there, the shepherds would roll the stone away from the well's mouth and water the sheep, and then they would return the stone to its place over the mouth of the well. Now this whole picture of this, just get this big stone over this well, and it is huge. It's probably, pretty heavy. And so what they would do is that they would all come together and they would wait till everyone got there before they moved this stone. It was like they needed all these people to make this happen. But really probably what they did, it became social hour, and they all just waited till everybody got there and they could yick and yak and talk a little bit, and then they would move the stone and kind of get on about their business. Okay, so let's go back to verse 4. Jacob asked the shepherds, "My brothers, where are you from?" "We're from Haran," they replied. Verse 5. He said to them, "Do you know Laban, Nahor's grandson?" "Yes, we know him," they answered. And then Jacob asked them, "Is he well?" Verse 7. "Look," he said, "the sun is still high. It's not time for the flocks to be gathered. Water the sheep, take them back to pasture." "We can't," they replied, "until all the flocks are gathered and the stone has been rolled away from the mouth of the well. Then we will water the sheep." And really, Jacob's kind of calling them out on their laziness right now and just sitting there. He's saying, "What are you doing? This isn't the time for this. Just water the sheep and then get them back. Do what you're supposed to be doing. You're wasting daylight. You're wasting time. Let's do something here." Verse 9. While he was talking with them, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she was a shepherd. And when Jacob saw Rachel, daughter of his uncle Laban, and Laban's sheep, he went over and he rolled the stone away from the mouth of the well, and he watered his uncle's sheep. There is no limit to what a man will do for a woman, especially the woman that he is attracted to. Picture this, okay? Guy in the gym, okay? Really not all that buff probably, he's sitting in there and not a whole lot of people in the gym, and he's working out, he's probably pushing a couple 45s, just kind of whatever. And out of the corner of his eye, here comes Rachel. And he stops and he looks at the guys and says, "Put on 2 more 45s. Okay? Puffed out like a banty rooster. You know what I'm talking about? Junior high boys. They do this really well, right? They want to run faster. They want to shoot they want the ball in their hand, when they look over and here comes Rachel, "Give me the ball. Give me the ball." They may not make 10 shots out of 10, but they want the ball. I mean, this is that picture, and it's just like, and now mind you, come on, this guy's 76 years old. And he sees Rachel coming and he's like, immediately, I'll roll the stone. Ugh. And he rolls the stone away, for this beautiful woman. Impressed, verse 11. And he moves quickly, by the way. Then Jacob kissed Rachel and began to weep aloud. So there's no question. She shows up, she looks good, he puffs up, rolls the stone, grabs her, gives her the big smooch, and then gets all emotional because he has immediately fallen in love. Verse 12. He had told Rachel that he was a relative of her father and a son of Rebekah. So she ran and told her father. And as soon as Laban heard the news about Jacob, his sister's son, he hurried to meet him. He embraced him and kissed him and brought him to his home. And there Jacob told him all of these things. Now here's a little side note, mini sermon. Because later in this story we'll see Laban did not have good intentions for Jacob. He did not have good intentions for his nephew. So let me just say this really quickly. Everyone who hugs you and kisses you does not necessarily want what's best for you. Just think about that. Everyone who hugs and kisses you does not necessarily want what's best for you. You got to be careful. It's so easy to be abused in this way, especially when your life is upside down. Jacob was very vulnerable at this point. He really was. He was running, for his life, but everybody who's good to you isn't necessarily good for you. And you say, well, Pastor Ron, that sounds kind of brutal because we're in this whole upward and outward thing, and we're supposed to love God with everything we have and then love others the way that we want to be loved. And yes, you do. I'm not in any way, shape, form, or fashion saying don't love people the way that Jesus does. But did Jesus surround himself with every single person that he met? Now, the message was for everyone, but we have to be careful. You got to be careful, especially when, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. When we're in these emotionally fragile states, we tend to gravitate and move towards people that we believe will tell us what we want to hear, not necessarily what we need to hear. Or people that will tell us to do what we want them. It's like we're validating our responses or we're validating our actions. Somebody says something, you want to go punch them in the face. And you're going to find somebody that's going to go tell you to go punch them in the face. It's just kind of, and maybe that's not our intention, but down inside, that's what we do. Just be careful. Just be careful. Because as you'll see in the story here in just a few minutes, it can get you in some pretty precarious places. Verse 14, let's go again. Then Laban said to him, you are my own flesh and blood. And after Jacob had stayed with him for a whole month, Laban said to him, just because you are a relative of mine, should you work for me for nothing? Tell me what your wages should be. Verse 16, here we go. Now Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the older was Leah. The name of the younger was Rachel. Leah had weak eyes, but Rachel had a lovely figure and was beautiful. Now, the weak eyes things, a lot of different people, theologians, people that study this have said many, many different things. Weak eyes could have mean that they were crossed. Weak eyes meant that she could have been weak to the eyes and, not as... One thing, this is what I know for sure. As beautiful as Rachel was, Leah was probably totally the opposite. Okay, not just that's I'm just being respectful, but that's that's just the way it was. Rachel looked good, Leah did not. Okay, so let's just paint that picture really, really quick. Okay, verse 18. Jacob was in love with Rachel and said, "I'll work for you 7 years in return for your younger daughter Rachel." Now, this tells us exactly how attracted that Jacob was to Rachel. He would work 7 years. Now, I would work 7 years for my beautiful wife. I would. But I'm so thankful I didn't have to. Actually, what I'm more thankful of is the fact that when she told her daddy, who was then the sheriff of Douglas County, that she was dating me, I was just thankful he didn't kill me. Just honest, great, But but I would work 14 years for my wife. That's how much I love her. And so we see this picture. Jacob says, I'll do this. I'll do this. Verse 19, Laban said, it's better that I give her to you than some other man. Stay here with me. So Jacob served 7 years to get Rachel, but they seemed like only days because of his love for her. That's like chick flick 101. Right? My house was full of chick flicks yesterday. Yesterday, my wife she was done with that. She is officially halfway done. I'm so proud of her. But she needed a break, and she was, woke up yesterday morning, and I had come to practice and do a few things. And she was like, well, I got to do this, and I got to do this, and I got to do this. I said, you ain't doing nothing. And I made her promise me. And so, I come to practice, did a few things, and went to a baptism yesterday, and then went out and played some golf. And I called her, about 1 or 1:30, or I don't remember what time it was. I said, what are you doing? Watching a movie? What you watching? I can't even pronounce it because I don't even care. It was a chick flick. She said, I got 5 of them. I said, well, what were they? And she was giving me the names. All 5 of them were chick flicks. And so I come home, that afternoon, and there's my wife and my 2 daughters in my bedroom watching chick flicks. That's just, So this is chick flick right here, okay? I love her so much. Then Jacob said to Laban, now remind you, he'd done his 7 years. Then Jacob said to Laban, give me my wife. My time is completed, and I want to make love to her. Why don't you tell us how you really feel, Jacob? He just throws it out there, okay? This is Bible, okay? You can't make this stuff up. So, he's given his time, and he wanted Rachel as his own. Verse 22. So Laban brought together all the people of the place and gave a feast. He threw a party, and it was a big party. And I really kind of liked, what Furtick said about this, and I'm just going to throw this out there because it really makes sense, especially here in just a little bit. And back in Old Testament, even in New Testament days, when you threw a party, there was lots of alcohol. That's just what they did. It was a cultural thing, and there was probably a ton at this particular party, and I'll show you that here in just a minute. Verse 23. But when evening came, he took his daughter Leah. Now remember, the deal was for Rachel. But when evening came, he took his daughter Leah and brought her to Jacob. And Jacob made love to her. And Laban gave his servant Zilpah to his daughter as her attendant. So, Jacob makes love to the wrong woman on his wedding night. Once again, this is Bible. This isn't made up. I'm just reading it for what it is. Seriously. This is why, and I'm just this is probably why I think there was a lot of alcohol at this party. I'm just saying it. You just don't make that kind of mistake. But Jacob, Laban brings in Leah, and all this, and then how does this happen? Seriously. And then the first part of verse 25. When morning came, there was Leah. He'd worked 7 years for Rachel. He said, hey, Dad, it's time. I would like my wife. Dad throws a big party. Jacob gets confused by whatever reason. Next morning comes. There's Leah. When morning came. See, Jacob had expected something for 7 years. He had worked hard for a particular thing, something he thought that he wanted for 7 years. But when morning came, there was Leah. Now, with all due respect to this story, have you ever worked really hard for something in your life? Something you wanted? Only to wake up one day and find something totally different than you thought it would be. Have you ever chased something so much and now, remember, we're talking about Jacob the deceiver. I know this story sounds really chick flicky, but he was still deceiving. He was still trying to pull the big one on Uncle Laban. And he wakes up in the morning, and it was something totally different than he had worked for, something totally different than he had expected. The deceiver had been deceived, and the tables were turning. Verse 25. So Jacob said to Laban, "What is this you've done to me?" He said, "I served you for Rachel, didn't I? Why have you deceived me?" Isn't that a crazy question? The deceiver just asked, "Why did you deceive me?" The trickster had been tricked. And it's a really simple point that we need to make, because maybe Jacob, you're just simply reaping what you sowed. Now think about his past. He deceived his brother Esau out of his blessing. He deceived him out of his birthright. And now he is being received. Listen, whatsoever a man sows, that shall he reap. We cannot mock God. We can't trick God. It doesn't happen. Now, sometimes we think that we can, because honestly, listen, in relation to our lives, if we live a lie, we will eventually end up lying next to Leah. Now think about that. If we live a lie, God will not be mocked. You can fool people, but you cannot fool God. For 7 years, Jacob thought he had one over on God. For 7 years, he thought he had one over on a good old Uncle Laban. And you know, in our lives, we make sinful choices, we make bad decisions, and you know, sometimes maybe there's no immediate consequences. You know, sometimes we do something and God just doesn't react, you know, because we get this fear. You know, you guys know it. Come on. I mean, seriously, we have the Holy Spirit in our lives. Part of the Holy Spirit's job is to convict us. When we do something wrong, say something wrong, that conviction is overwhelming, right? And so we feel that conviction, and it's like one eye, you know, we got one eye closed and one eye open, and we're just waiting for God to show up and, you know, do God's thing. And, you know, he doesn't show up, and we're like, oh. Maybe that wasn't so bad. And then, you know, and then we do it again, and you know, where's God? You know, and then we go on. And before long, you know, God doesn't, you know, we're not seeing God work in our lives, you know, with the discipline thing right up front. And so, you know, we kind of become comfortable to those actions, and we become comfortable to those choices. And you know what, we think, well, maybe, you know, this isn't so bad. I'm getting away with this. You know, and then, you know, for 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, whatever. And then morning comes. And you wake up next to Leah and you're like, whoa, wait a minute. Oh, whoa, whoa, whoa. I didn't think this was all that. Whoa. I mean, sometimes that's, you know, we live this lie. Doing things on our time that we know we shouldn't do. Teenagers trying to be one way at church, one way with your parents, but another way around, you know, your friends. We live a lie pretending to be someone that we're not, and then one day, morning will come, and there will be consequences with deep conviction, and then there will be dealing with this issue. And listen, we cannot fool God, and we cannot fool ourselves. We cannot do it. And you know what? You know, young people, teenagers, younger adults, maybe it starts, you know, just so simple. Maybe it starts with an experiment or thinking it's all just fun and a party, but 7 years later, you're hooked, and you wake up next to Leah. I mean, it's kind of a, you know, this is serious. And, you know, take the relation of the story just for a second. Maybe adults, it starts as just a quick look at a video here or there. No one's looking and you're not hurting anyone. But 7 years later, you can't stop watching and you're addicted to it and drawn to it all of the time. And then when morning comes, you wake up and you're lying next to Leah and it's just like, oh, I didn't want this. But you got it. Because see, this is what I know. We can't deceive God. You can't deceive yourself. But boy, the great deceiver can sure deceive us, can't he? Man, our enemy, he's good at that. He's good at making us think things are okay, and good at making us think that, that it's going to be okay and God doesn't care. I mean, he started early with Eve, didn't he? Oh, it'll be okay. Go ahead and eat it. God doesn't really know what he's talking about. Oh, and when you do eat it, man, it's going to be awesome because you're going to know things that God knows and see things that God, all this knowledge. I mean, he is the great deceiver, and he has no problems deceiving us in that way. Someday morning will come. God's grace will be there. Now, it will be there. But so will consequences. What you thought looked great, what you thought was Rachel, ends up being Leah, and it's not what you signed up for, and it's not what you worked hard for, and you end up hooked and addicted and torn and hurt and confused and depressed, and you feel weighted and chained, and you're like, what just happened? How did this happen? Let's keep going. Verse 26, Laban replied, it's not our custom here to give the younger daughter in marriage before the older one. Boy, he met his match there, didn't he? It's not our custom here. The great excuse from the great deceiver. Finish this daughter's bridal week. Then we will give you the younger one also. But in return, for another 7 years of work. And Jacob did so, and he finished the week with Leah. And then Laban gave him his daughter Rachel to be his wife. And Laban gave his servant Bilhah to his daughter Rachel as her attendant. And then Jacob made love to Rachel also. And his love for Rachel was greater than his love for Leah. And he worked for Laban another 7 years. Now there's two things we see as a part of this story that we're going to look at here in just a second. And it's approval and achievement. It's approval and achievement. Two very foundational things in our lives. We all want the approval of other people, correct? And we all want to achieve things that are set out before us. I mean, we don't want to look at ourselves and feel like we're a failure, but we want to be accepted by other people. Okay, verse 31. By the way, this is Rachel and Leah. We're going to look at both of them. Verse 31. When the Lord saw that Leah was not loved, he enabled her to conceive, but Rachel remained childless. When the Lord saw that Jacob had no interest in Leah. Now, I've kind of made fun of Leah up until now. But Leah is a very important person in this story. A very important person. Because see, when he saw Jacob had rejected her and really didn't want anything to do with her, when the Lord saw Leah hurting and feeling bad about herself and thinking she was less of a person and not as pretty and not as good, God took action. God took action. And the reason is because God selects what man rejects. God selects what man rejects. And can I just speak this today? Because maybe that's you. Maybe today you kind of feel like Leah. In a sense that you feel rejected, you feel alone, you feel like nobody really cares about you or you don't matter. Or, I mean, it could be any type of feeling. You feel less of a person than somebody else. Unwanted, cast out, looked over, bullied. Maybe you even feel unlovable. Maybe you were always the last one picked and you don't feel important. But listen, God has this way of selecting the ones who people reject. That's how important you are to him. And as we go through the rest of this story, you're going to see just exactly how important that Leah was in this journey. When God saw Jacob rejecting Leah, he stepped in and he blessed her with a child. See, God is the God who finds the good in those who no one else sees good in. He's the one who chooses the unchosen, and he sees you right where you are, and you're special to him. You were created to be the masterpiece that he designed. He designed. And listen, we're all going to have to deal with rejection from time to time. It's a part of life. Everyone is told no. Everyone, hears something said to them that's not right. Or, you're too this and you're too that and you're not this and you're not. I mean, I get that. We all have to deal with that. But rejection isn't a dead end. It's a redirection. I mean, it very simply could just be a redirection. We get to a point and we're like, oh, that doesn't work. And you know what happens so many times? People that begin to feel like Leah's and begin to feel like they're not worth anything, they get to that point of rejection. And, and I've said this many times. It's called I call it the McFly syndrome. All you Back to the Future people, if you haven't watched Back to the Future, you need to watch it. Good movie. But they were always, I don't think I can take that kind of rejection. I mean, it just, they get to that place. And you know what rejection does? Rejection keeps a lot of people from moving forward. Rejection keeps a lot of people from experiencing life and experiencing blessings. But that simple answer of no, or that rejection in that moment could just be a simple redirection, into God's purpose and God's path and in His plan. God has something better for you. When you hit these rejection walls, you start feeling like you're an outcast or you're worthless or not important or whatever, and you start trying to prove to people that you're all this, and you start compromising your values and who you are just to get accepted. You're losing yourself, and you're better than that. I'm here today as your pastor and your friend. You're better than that. I don't care who you are. I don't care how old you are better than that. God loves you more than that. You're chosen. Everybody say, I'm chosen. You're chosen. You're chosen. Leah was chosen. Chosen by God. But she still feels like she has something to prove. So she starts having babies. Now, that's not a bad thing in itself. Babies are awesome. I love babies, especially in my own family and in our church. It's a great way to grow a church, by the way. So apparently Leah was good at having babies, but why she was having them was the issue. It's good to succeed, but why are you wanting to succeed? Verse 32, let's keep going. Leah became pregnant and gave birth to a son, and she named him Reuben, for she said, it is because the Lord has seen my misery. Surely my husband will love me now. She just wanted her husband to approve of her. She just wanted her husband to accept her, to love her. So I ask you this question. Who are you trying to get to love and accept you by something that you can produce? If you're working hard at trying to get that, just think about it. Maybe you're killing yourself trying to get that. Verse 33, she conceived again. When she gave birth to a son, she said, because the Lord heard that I am not loved, He gave me this one too. So she named him Simeon. Jacob still didn't love her. It didn't work. Verse 34, and again she conceived. And when she gave birth to a son, she said, now at last my husband will become attached to me, because I have borne him 3 sons. So he was named Levi. But it didn't work again. Are you getting the cycle? Verse 35, she conceived again. And when she gave birth to a son, she said, this time I will praise the Lord. So she named them Judah. Then she stopped having kids. What we see in Leah is a picture in so many lives producing things that we hope will win us approval, trying to work for our acceptance, usually in the wrong way, in the wrong places, and usually from the wrong people. Until God is enough for you, it will never be enough, no matter what it is. Let me say that again. Until God is enough for you, it will never be enough, no matter what it is. I don't care what it is. God has to be first. See, Leah keeps having babies, but she can't get Jacob's acceptance. Doing stuff is great. Accomplishing things are great, but sometimes you just have to stop all the stuff to get accepted and praise God for who He is and what He's done in your life and who He has made you to be. Now, Rachel, we think, Rachel, she's loved by Jacob. She has everything. She's living the dream life. But look at this. Genesis 30, verse 1. When Rachel saw that she was not bearing Jacob any children, she became jealous of her sister. And so she said to Jacob, give me children or I'll die. Rachel is the picture of someone who has it all going on the inside, but is empty, or on the outside, but is empty and unproductive on the inside. She's loved by Jacob, but not able to give Jacob what he wants most, and she gets jealous. And this made Jacob mad. Verse 2, Jacob became angry with her and said, am I in the place of God? What he was saying is, am I God who has kept you from having children? He's like, is this my fault? That's what he was saying. Is this my fault? Leah's having kids. This isn't my fault. You think I'm God? Some of the people that we're most jealous of are the most miserable on the inside. And some of the people you're trying so hard to be like are completely empty. This is important. Sometimes we see someone and we think, I've got to be like them. I have to dress like them. I have to talk like them. I've got to do all this just like them. And you know what? You end up being and pretending to be someone that you're not. And remember, God cannot bless who we pretend to be. That's what happens. And in this story, Rachel's like, well, Leah's doing this. I want to be like Leah. And she wasn't Leah. And when we look on the outside, we think, oh, well, Rachel's the one that's got it all going on. But in all honesty, she was hurting probably just as bad as Leah was. It was the same thing, just different. And we strive to be like somebody else and all of this stuff. I remember when God first called me to preach, and God called me to preach in the middle of 30 men. 30 men during that time in our church had been called to preach, pretty much all within just a few months. I mean, there were some preachers. And I remember standing and listening to Lester Platt. Anybody ever heard Lester Platt preach? Man, that old bald head gets red, the face gets red, he'd stomp, shout, and stomp. Boy, he could preach. And Greg Chamberlain, anybody heard Greg? Boy, Greg would just weep and he'd pour out his heart. And I'd hear all these Buddy Boyd, and this was on there, and I'm thinking, oh, I got to preach like him, and I need to stomp like him, and I need to do this like him. And it was awful. God can't bless who you pretend to be. And it wasn't until I got away from every single one of them. Every one of them. I mean, literally moved away. Until God began to show me who I was and tell me, you're okay who you are. Just be who you are because that's who I created you to be. Stop pretending. Rachel was working hard at trying to be somebody that she wasn't. So dramatic. Rachel has beauty, but she can't have kids. And Leah can, but she doesn't have beauty. And both of them are miserable because they want what the other one has, and neither are happy with who they are. Why are we so drawn to what we don't have? Why are we so drawn to be so much like others that we lose ourselves in the process? God was working in both Rachel and Leah's life, but they couldn't stop long enough to see it. Leah was like, if Jacob would just love me. And Rachel was like, if I could just have a kid, if I could just do this, and if I could just do that, and if I could just do this, and if I could just... Don't we do that? Well, if I could just have this much money, if I could just have that car, if I could just have that house, if I could just have this, and that would happen, and if I could just do this, then my life would be fine. But I promise you, when you talk to people that get all that stuff, they've still got issues. They've still got problems. God's just not enough. God can't bless who we pretend to be. Verse 3 and 5. I'm hurrying, I promise. I'm sorry. Then she said, here is Bilhah, my servant. Sleep with her so she can bear children for me, and I too can build a family through her. So she gave him her servant Bilhah as a wife, and Jacob slept with her, and she became pregnant and bore him a son. And then it gets real confusing. And I'm going to read these really quick. Verse 6 through 16. Then Rachel said, God has vindicated me. He has listened to my plea and given me a son. Because then of this she named him Dan. Rachel's servant Bilhah conceived again and bore Jacob a second son. And then Rachel said, I have a great struggle with my sister, and I have won. Really? She didn't want anything. She wasn't even the one having the kids. But it's this false thing, She was trying to control the situation, manipulate the future, manipulate her situation, and she was still just as empty on the inside as she ever was. She named him Naphtali, and when Leah saw that she had stopped having children, she took her servant Zilpah and gave her to Jacob as his wife. Then it becomes a competition. This is crazy. So Leah's servant bore Jacob a son, and then Leah said, what a good fortune. So she named him Gad. Leah's servant Zilpah bore Jacob a second son, and then Leah said, how happy I am. No, she's not. The women will call me happy. See, she's looking not only for acceptance in Jacob, from Jacob, now she wants acceptance from all the women in the place. Really? We do this. During wheat harvest, Reuben went out into the fields and found some mandrake plants. Now, mandrakes at that particular time, it was supposed to help with fertility, and that kind of thing. And so that's very significant, okay? So went out and found some mandrake plants, which he brought to his mother Leah. And Rachel said to Leah, please give me some of your son's mandrakes. But she said to her, wasn't it enough that you took my husband? Will you take my son's mandrakes too? Very well, Rachel said. He can sleep with you tonight in return for your son's mandrakes. And so when Jacob came in from the fields that evening, Leah went out to meet him. And she said, you must sleep with me. She said, I've hired you with my son's mandrakes. So he slept with her for that night. Listen, selling out for some mandrakes, trying to manipulate and control her future, not recognizing that only God can do that. Seriously. Sold out. We want control. We want our life to be our way, not His way. We want what we don't have, even when we're not supposed to have it. I mean, look at that. That whole stretch of 10 verses is nuts. Trying to manipulate that person and control the sister and this sister controlling that sister and using all these other people and doing things they probably shouldn't have been doing. And now, I mean, it's crazy. Verse 17, God listened to Leah. Oh. Yeah, that's a cool verse to me. All that stuff I just read to you, all that nonsense I just read to you, they were messed up doing anything other than following God. And then it says God listened. You know what that tells me? I don't care how messed up our lives get. I don't care how far away from God's plan we are. He still listens. He still has that purpose. He still had a purpose for Leah. In fact, that purpose, as we'll see in a minute, had really already begun. So God listened to Leah, and she became pregnant and bore Jacob a 5th son. And then Leah said, God has rewarded me for giving him my servant to my husband. And so she named him Issachar. And Leah conceived again and bore Jacob a 6th son. And then Leah said, God has presented me with a precious gift, and this time my husband will treat me with honor. She's still trying, because I born him 6 sons. So she named him Zebulon. And sometime later she gave birth to a daughter and named her Dinah. And then God remembered Rachel. He listened to her. After all of this time and all of these mistakes, God listened. I'm so glad God didn't quit listening to me. Aren't you glad? Aren't you glad all those messed up times in our lives and all those stupid mistakes that we make, that God doesn't stop listening? That He hears us when we cry, that He sees our heart and He sees our hurt and He sees our pain, and He remembered Rachel. So all this stuff that Rachel was doing to try to achieve was eclipsed in one moment when God remembered her. See, one moment of receiving from God outweighs a lifetime of what you try to receive without Him. Isn't that true? All of us, we've tried and traded mandrakes to try and get what we wanted out of life. And then we woke up and didn't even have what we really thought we wanted to have. Verse 23 and 24, I'm almost done. She became pregnant, and she gave birth to a son and said, God has taken away my disgrace. And she named him Joseph. And she said, may the Lord add to me another son. Leah wanted acceptance. She wanted to be loved, but she felt rejected and left out. So much that she tried to whatever that she could do to manipulate that acceptance from Jacob, but it just left her empty. And it left her trying harder to become accepted by not only Jacob, but even those around her. You know what, today maybe you feel lost, alone, rejected, unworthy, and unlovable. Maybe you feel like Leah. Maybe that's your life right now. Maybe you're putting on the facade. Maybe you're putting on the show and the smiles and everything is fine. But maybe you're feeling like Leah. But I've told you this whole time that Leah is an important part of the story. Leah is an important part of history. Leah is an important part of your life and your relationship with God today. Because see, in Matthew, at the very beginning in chapter 1, this whole chapter 1, the genealogy, 14 generations, 14 generations, 14 generations, it starts like this. This is the genealogy of Jesus, the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Abraham was the father of Isaac. Isaac, the father of Jacob. And Jacob, the father of Judah. Leah was Judah's mama. Leah, the one that Jacob had rejected, the one that Jacob wouldn't give any time to. Leah was the father or the mother of Judah. And then in verse 16, I'm not reading all these names, But then in verse 10, it said, then Jacob, the father of Joseph, and the husband of Mary, and Mary was the mother of Jesus, who is called the Messiah. Jesus came from the line of Judah, who came from Leah, and the one that Jacob never wanted. Listen, you could be never wanted by people. You could be rejected by people, but Jesus wants you. He wants you to be a part of his life. He wants the relationship with you. And you may think that you're worthless, and your life is pointless, and you have no purpose, but Jesus says, yes, you do, because that line could have came from Rachel. And honestly, if we look at the story, well, why didn't Judah come from Rachel? Because she was the beautiful one. She was the one that had it all going on, but it came from Leah. Your life is important today. I don't know where you are, and I don't know who this is for. But I believe this, somebody in both of these services today walk in this building, and I believe someone is sitting in this room today. I prayed this, I believe this, and you feel like your life has no purpose, it has no meaning, you have been rejected, people have talked bad about you, it could be whatever the story, and you have set yourself this morning in the place of Leah in this moment. And I just want you to know that God sees tomorrow long before you do. His thoughts are higher than your thoughts, and his ways higher than your ways. He knows that. And awesome things come from what man rejects. Jesus, the Son of God, came from the line of her son. That's how important you are to him. So today, if you're feeling rejected or alone or not good enough, God has a plan for your life. And that plan is to bring forth Jesus out of your life, out of your rejection, your frustration, your depression, out of your failure, out of your flaws. And God will turn rejection into a blessing. See, the one that Jacob never even wanted gave him the child who would ultimately save the world. How cool is that? You are chosen. Now, you can't forget Rachel, by the way. She messed up too. But she gave birth to a son named Joseph. Joseph went on to be the second in all of command and ended up saving his entire family. And Joseph summed all that up when he said this: what man meant for evil, God used for good and for saving many, many lives. So Rachel, the one who could not produce, produced the child that saved the whole nation of Israel. Sometimes we have to get to a place of understanding that sometimes rejection is the blessing that leads to God's acceptance. Sometimes frustration is the blessing that leads us to finally depending fully on God. And this morning as I close, it's time to get past what's happening to us and see what God wants to do through us. Crazy story, wasn't it? Crazy story. Lots of different truths. That's why I just said, go back and read it. Chapter 29, chapter 30. Remember this. Read it. You cannot deceive God. Some of you today, maybe you need to come to that point of realization of maybe some things that you're doing in your life, and very just simply just confess before God, and maybe you got to ask for forgiveness and begin something new. Don't wait 7 years till you wake up one morning and, Some of you today, maybe you're like Rachel and you're putting it all on the outside, and you're looking great like you've got it all going on, but in the inside it's just, you're broken. And maybe some of you are like Leah, feeling rejected. Maybe you're working so hard to get the approval and the acceptance of people that it's just driving you deeper and deeper and deeper into a feeling of the lack of self-worth and self-esteem. You're chosen. Everybody say, I'm chosen. You're that special and that important. Let's pray today. God, thank you for this word and this story. God, your word is so alive. It really is. It's alive. This is real, and I'm thankful for it today. God, today I know this. There may be some today that need to ask for forgiveness. Some today that need to become very honest and allow you to have control of their lives, their hurt and their pain. Some today maybe feel rejected, God, by people. Wherever it is, God, that we are as a person, this is what I know. In your presence, our lives are changed. And so this morning, God, that's what I pray and believe for. I'm believing for that change. That step of just letting everything go and allowing you to be enough, you to be everything. And I'm thankful, God, for this opportunity in your presence in this moment. In Jesus' name.